Welcome, true crime aficionados, to a chilling journey into the heart of an American nightmare. Tonight, we unearth a case that terrorized a nation, a relentless hunt for a predator operating in the shadows. The Crimson Harvest, an American nightmare. Before we delve into the dark depths of this investigation, if you're drawn to stories of justice pursued against overwhelming odds, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us shed light on these profound human dramas. Now, prepare yourselves, for the hunt begins. The quaint town of Sterling Creek, nestled in the scenic valleys of upstate New York, was a tapestry woven with old money, quiet traditions, and the comforting hum of rural prosperity. Its main street, lined with charming boutiques and a venerable clock tower, pulsed with a rhythm that had remained unchanged for generations. Children rode bikes freely, doors were often left unlocked, and the biggest scandal typically involved a zoning dispute or a particularly aggressive garden gnome. This idyllic facade, however, was about to be irrevocably shattered, revealing a sinister undercurrent that no one had dared to imagine. The first victim was a shock. Emily Hayes, 26, a beloved kindergarten teacher, known for her sunny disposition and infectious laugh, simply vanished from her morning jog along the old canal path. Her disappearance sent a ripple of bewildered concern through Sterling Creek. Emily wasn't the type to run away, nor did she have any known enemies. The local sheriff, Ben Carter, a man whose biggest challenge usually involved retrieving stray livestock, initiated an immediate, extensive search. Every volunteer in town, from hardened farmers to nervous teenagers, combed the woods and the canal banks. 3 days later, her body was discovered, partially submerged in a remote section of the creek, miles downstream from where she was last seen. The discovery rocked Sterling Creek to its core. The autopsy revealed a single, precise wound, a clean, surgical incision, and no signs of struggle or sexual assault. Her eyes, however, were wide open, staring blankly, and a small, delicate flower, a crimson lily, lay carefully placed on her chest. Sheriff Carter, though inexperienced with such brutality, felt a cold dread. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was something deliberate, something chillingly precise. The state police were called in, bringing with them a team of seasoned detectives and forensic specialists. Leading the investigation was Detective Izzy Reyes, a sharp, no-nonsense officer with a reputation for tenacity and an uncanny ability to connect disparate dots. Izzy, a veteran of several urban homicide units, felt the palpable shift in Sterling Creek's atmosphere, the quiet fear, the unspoken suspicion, the sudden shattering of innocence. This was a community ill-equipped to handle such darkness. Izzy and her team meticulously processed the scene, but found little. No fingerprints, no traceable DNA, no clear signs of entry or exit from the creek bank. It was as if the killer had materialized from thin air, performed his grim work, and then vanished. The crimson lily, though seemingly a flourish, became the only unique signature. Botanists identified it as a specific, rare hybrid, not native to the region, suggesting it was cultivated. Just as Sterling Creek began to collectively mourn Emily and hesitantly, desperately, try to reassert a sense of normalcy, the second victim emerged. Michael Thorne, 38, a prominent local architect, was found in his sprawling, isolated home. Like Emily, he had a single, precise incision. Like Emily, there was no sign of forced entry or struggle. And like Emily, a single, pristine crimson lily rested on his chest, his eyes wide open, reflecting the ceiling. The terror that now gripped Sterling Creek was visceral. This wasn't a fluke. This was a pattern. And the killer was not just targeting strangers. He was striking at the heart of their close-knit community. Panic spread like wildfire. Schools canceled outdoor activities. Parents implemented curfews. Locked doors became the norm, not the exception. The idyllic facade of Sterling Creek crumbled under the weight of an invisible, silent predator. Izzy's team worked around the clock, mapping connections between the victims. Emily, a beloved teacher widely liked. Michael, successful, respected, but a bit reclusive. No obvious links. No shared enemies. No common social circles. The method of killing was disturbingly similar, almost ritualistic in its precision. The killer was clearly highly organized, intelligent, and operating with chilling composure. The media descended, turning Sterling Creek into a national symbol of creeping dread. The Sterling Creek Strangler, the Lily Killer, the Phantom Blade headlines blared, each contributing to the growing hysteria. The lack of motive, the seemingly random nature of the victims, and the chilling signature of the Crimson Lily elevated the killer to a mythical, terrifying status. Izzy, however, resisted the urge to succumb to the sensationalism. She focused on the cold, hard facts. The incision, precise, indicating medical knowledge or a highly specialized skill. The lack of struggle, suggesting a killer who was either incredibly strong, incredibly fast, or someone trusted by the victims. The lily, a key, a message, or simply a ritual flourish. They traced the specific lily hybrid to a handful of high-end nurseries across the country, but this yielded no immediate leads. She interviewed everyone remotely connected to Emily and Michael. Each conversation was a slow, painful extraction of details from a terrified populace. No one saw anything. No one heard anything. The killer was a ghost, leaving only the chilling bloom as a calling card. A breakthrough, however subtle, came from Michael Thorne's home. His advanced security system, while not breached, had logged a momentary power fluctuation at the approximate time of death. It was too brief to be a full outage, but enough to cause a flicker. This suggested that the killer might have some technical expertise, or was using a device to momentarily disable power grids in localized areas. It was a tantalizing, yet frustratingly vague lead. Izzy assembled a profile. Highly intelligent, organized, meticulous. Possesses specialized knowledge, medical or similar precision skill. Likely a loner, blending seamlessly into the background. The lack of traditional motive suggested a psychological imperative power, control, or a twisted sense of justice or ritual. The selection of victims, though seemingly random, likely had a hidden pattern, perhaps symbolic to the killer alone. The town, meanwhile, was paralyzed by fear. Children stopped playing outside. Businesses saw a drastic drop in customers. The vibrant community that once defined Sterling Creek had been replaced by a tense, suspicious silence. Sheriff Carter, overwhelmed, relied heavily on Izzy's cool-headed approach, but even he felt the pressure of a community desperate for answers, for safety. Izzy knew they were chasing a shadow, a phantom who left behind only the chilling beauty of a crimson lily and the gaping wound of a vanished life. The killer was refining his craft, growing bolder, and with each passing day, the fear in Sterling Creek solidified into a grim acceptance of its new reality. The idyllic town had been scarred, indelibly marked by the first crimson blooms, signs of a predator who had chosen their quiet haven as his hunting ground, launching a terrifying serial-killing spree that would test the very limits of law enforcement and plunge an entire nation into a nightmare. The harvest had just begun, and the fields of Sterling Creek were ripe with terror. The initial shock in Sterling Creek had given way to a pervasive, suffocating dread. Sheriff Carter and Detective Reyes found themselves leading a desperate investigation against an unseen enemy, a ghost who left nothing but a botanical signature and a community in ruins. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit stepped in, recognizing the hallmark of a highly organized, ritualistic serial killer. Their primary theory coalesced around a killer who sought control and possessed a unique skill set. The third victim surfaced nearly a month later, not in Sterling Creek, but in a small, sleepy town called Oak Haven, 50 miles north. This geographical shift sent a fresh wave of panic across the wider region. The victim was David Chun, a respected local historian, found in his home library, surrounded by ancient texts. The modus operandi was identical. A single, precise incision, no forced entry, no struggle, and the chilling placement of a crimson lily on his chest, his eyes wide, fixed on nothing. The Lily Killer, as he was now widely known, was mobile. This complicated the investigation immensely, turning a localized hunt into a multi-jurisdictional nightmare. The task force, now encompassing law enforcement from several counties and state lines, struggled with coordination and resource allocation. The media frenzy intensified, amplifying the fear and pushing politicians to demand results. Izzy Reyes, however, saw the geographic expansion as a potential break, albeit a terrifying one. The killer wasn't tied to Sterling Creek. He was choosing his locations and likely his victims based on criteria only he understood. She updated the profile. The killer was highly intelligent, meticulous, and likely had a deep understanding of human behavior, using charm or manipulation to gain entry. The victims, varied in age, profession, and social standing, still offered no clear common denominator other than their quiet, respectable lives. The recurring power flicker, first noted at Michael Thorne's house, was now confirmed at David Chen's. It was too consistent to be coincidence. A deep dive into regional power grids revealed brief, localized micro-outages occurring around the time of each death. This wasn't a random anomaly. It was a deliberate act, executed with precision. The killer wasn't just breaching physical security. He was subtly manipulating infrastructure. This suggested sophisticated technical skills, possibly in background in engineering, electronics, or even cybersecurity. Izzy's team broadened their net. They began investigating individuals with this specific skill set who had connections to any of the towns where victims had been found. It was a daunting task, wading through thousands of potential candidates. Simultaneously, forensic botanists expanded their search for the rare crimson lily hybrid, tracing its distribution to a specialized network of private collectors and elite botanical gardens. This line of inquiry, too, was slow, complex, and yielded no immediate suspects. The emotional toll on the communities was immense. People lived in a state of hypervigilance, distrusting strangers and even neighbors. The once friendly facade of small-town America was replaced by suspicion and fear. Local businesses suffered as people stayed home. The killer, through his remote and seemingly random acts, was effectively shutting down entire regions. Izzy, exhausted but relentless, started drawing maps, not just of locations, but of routes. She theorized that the killer wasn't just choosing towns, he was choosing a path, a circuit. She studied satellite imagery, looking for hidden roads, secluded cabins, anything that could serve as a base of operations or a transit point. She also delved into the victims' lives, looking for a common thread that wasn't immediately apparent. Were they all intellectuals? Solitary individuals? Did they share a subtle, unspoken trait that only the killer could perceive? A crucial, almost invisible, detail emerged from David Chen's case. In his meticulously organized library, a single book was out of place. It was a rare, first-edition text on ancient funeral rites and purification rituals. While Chen was a historian, this particular book seemed tangential to his usual academic pursuits. Izzy discovered it had been recently checked out from a university library hundreds of miles away, then returned shortly before his death. The library records showed that only one other person had checked out the same book in the last 6 months. A reclusive academic, Dr. Elias Thorne, from a university in a completely different state. Elias Thorne was a renowned but controversial scholar of ancient religions and death rituals. He lived a solitary life, primarily confined to his research and teaching. He had no known connections to any of the victims, and his academic career provided a perfect alibi for each murder. Yet, the coincidence of the obscure book, combined with his unique area of expertise, sent a prickle of intuition down Izzy's spine. Could the killer be a scholar, a meticulous student of death, performing some twisted ritual? The FBI quietly initiated background checks on Elias Thorne. His life was a sterile landscape of academic pursuits and solitary living. No criminal record, no violent history. But the deeper they dug, the more unsettling details emerged. Thorne had a fascination, almost an obsession, with the concept of purification through sacrifice in ancient cults. He had also, years ago, briefly worked as a consultant for a specialized power grid company, suggesting the technical expertise needed for the micro-outages. Izzy knew this was a long shot, but it was the first real, tangible lead that connected the killer's potential motive, ritualistic acts, with his specific methods, power manipulation. She theorized that the victims were not random, but chosen for specific, symbolic reasons, perhaps representing archetypes in the killer's twisted worldview: the innocent, Emily; the builder, Michael; the keeper of knowledge, David. Each was a sacrifice to his terrifying personal ritual. The task force, stretched thin and under immense pressure, was hesitant to pursue an academic with no direct criminal links. But Izzy, driven by a gut feeling and the chilling coherence of the pieces, pushed relentlessly. She believed Thorne was the phantom, the Lily killer, who left a widening stain of fear across the American landscape. They needed to get closer, to observe him without tipping him off, to find the definitive link that would prove he was the architect of their nightmare. The chase was becoming increasingly complex, moving from physical evidence to the dark corridors of a twisted mind, a mind consumed by ancient rituals and the chilling pursuit of a very modern terror. The harvest was far from over. It was merely expanding its reach, threatening to consume everything in its path. The surveillance on Dr. Elias Thorne was a game of meticulous patience. Agent Reyes and her skeletal task force observed his every move, every quiet habit. Thorne was a creature of routine, his life a sterile cycle of lectures, library research, and solitary walks through a vast, isolated arboretum near his university. He was polite, unremarkable, yet Izzy felt a profound sense of unease whenever she watched him. It was his very lack of overt affect, his almost clinical detachment, that resonated with the profile of the Lily killer. The breakthrough came, ironically, from the Crimson Lily. Forensic botanists, following Izzy's relentless push, had finally traced the rare hybrid to a specialized, private botanical garden in a secluded valley hundreds of miles from Sterling Creek. This garden, known for its exotic and rare flora, operated under strict confidentiality, serving a clientele of passionate, often reclusive, collectors. A deep dive into their digital records revealed that Dr. Elias Thorne was one of their most consistent and significant customers, ordering large quantities of the exact Crimson Lily hybrid over the past 2 years, far more than a typical enthusiast would require for a personal garden. He always paid in cash and insisted on discreet, unmarked deliveries. This was the smoking gun. The unique Lily, a signature, directly linked to a suspect with the means, motive, as per Izzy's evolving profile, and intellectual capacity to be the killer. The power grid anomalies also fit his past consultancy work. The precise incisions suggested medical or anatomical knowledge, which Thorne, given his deep research into ancient embalming and sacrificial rituals, could have acquired. The warrant was finally approved, but it was for discreet entry and examination, not an arrest. They needed more direct evidence, something irrefutable. Under the cover of darkness, a specialized forensic team, led by Izzy herself, entered Elias Thorne's secluded home. The house was not what they expected. Not a chaotic den of madness, but an immaculate, almost monastic space. Bookshelves lined every wall, filled with texts on ancient civilizations, anthropology, and, chillingly, detailed studies of death rituals across cultures. His office was a testament to meticulous organization. And there, in a locked, temperature-controlled room in the basement, they found it. A sophisticated, custom-built grow chamber, filled with dozens of thriving crimson lily plants, their petals a vibrant, almost unnatural red. This was his private, chilling garden. Next to the grow chamber, meticulously laid out on a sterile workbench, were an array of surgical tools, gleaming and unsettlingly clean. And then, the ultimate horror, a collection of small, beautifully crafted wooden boxes, each containing a single, carefully preserved human organ. Each box was labeled with a name: Emily Hayes, Michael Thorne, David Chan, and others' names corresponding to the known victims and several unconfirmed disappearances from across the region. The organs were not random. They were specific, consistently the heart or the liver, preserved with a skill that suggested expertise beyond that of a mere amateur. The truth, stark and unspeakably grim, crystallized. Elias Thorne wasn't just killing. He was performing a ritual, a profound, terrifying act of collection and preservation, driven by his warped scholarly obsessions. The victims weren't random. They were offerings, chosen for some symbolic quality known only to him. The lily was not just a signature, but part of the ritual itself, a sacred offering. And the lack of bodies? He wasn't disposing of them. He was consuming them, not for hunger, but for their essence, their purified spirit, a perverted extension of the ancient rituals he studied. The organs were his ultimate trophies, tangible proof of his monstrous harvest. The arrest of Dr. Elias Thorne was swift and, like his initial capture, met with a chilling lack of resistance. He was apprehended at his university office, calmly grading papers. When Izzy confronted him, showing him photos from his home, he merely sighed, a look of almost serene acceptance on his face. "You understand, then," he said, his voice quiet, scholarly. "It was necessary for the purification." The interrogation that followed was a descent into the mind of a truly unique monster. Thorne, brilliant and articulate, explained his philosophy with chilling clarity. He believed that modern society had lost its connection to ancient truths, particularly the power of death and sacrifice. He saw his victims as vessels, their lives mundane, but their deaths, orchestrated by him, transformed into acts of profound spiritual significance. The organs were sacred essences, to be preserved and revered. The consumption, he claimed, was a way to integrate their purest forms into his own being, elevating him, purifying him, and granting him a deeper understanding of the universe. He spoke of his victims without malice, without regret, almost with a strange reverence, seeing them as willing participants in his grand, terrifying ritual. He was not mad in the conventional sense, but utterly consumed by a self-created, terrifying reality. The revelations shattered the national conscience. The ritual killer, the organ collector, the crimson harvester, new headlines screamed, replacing the old monikers. The sheer calculated depravity, the intellectual justification for unspeakable acts, sent a shiver of true horror through the country. The quiet academic, a phantom in plain sight, had systematically harvested lives for his twisted beliefs. At the trial, Elias Thorne remained a figure of chilling composure. He listened to the horrific testimonies, the forensic evidence, and the impassioned pleas of the victims' families with a detached, almost academic interest. He occasionally corrected minor inaccuracies in the prosecution's timeline, as if he were reviewing a research paper. His own testimony was a disturbing lecture on ancient death cults and the necessity of sacrifice, delivered with scholarly precision. The jury, however, was unmoved by his intellectual justifications. They saw the cold, hard facts of murder and desecration. Elias Thorne was found guilty on all counts, a just end to his reign of terror. He was sentenced to multiple life terms, ensuring he would never again walk free. In the sterile confines of his maximum security cell, Elias Thorne reportedly continued to write, filling notebooks with his theories, his rituals, and his chilling understanding of death. The crimson lilies, a symbol of his horrific harvest, were forever etched into the collective memory of the towns he terrorized. Sterling Creek and Oakhaven slowly began the long, painful process of healing, but the scars of the crimson harvest remained, a grim reminder of the monster who walked among them, a scholar of death who brought ancient, unspeakable rituals into the heart of modern America, leaving a stain that would never truly wash away. The nightmare had ended, but its echoes would reverberate for generations.